Okay, we're gonna get started here. So our subject tonight is fun. I'm gonna go through some management ideas, and we're gonna be talking about management of nutrition. So we're not talking about nutrition for plants or gardens or soil. We're talking about the food that we eat. So how do we grow food that is the most nutritious food? So that is our subject tonight. And we want to be able to grow food that's super nutrient dense. We want food that tastes good. We want food that is fun to eat and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of different ways to manage a farm or a garden, any kind of a food production system. And nutrition management is one of the things that we need to be focusing on. Nutrition management in food production is not something that people focus on very much. I kind of feel like it's overlooked in most farming enterprises, most farming businesses. They don't focus on the nutritional levels of the food. It's not really something that people have a management plan for. When I've been in like all the different classes that I've gone to, all the different webinars I've participated in, I've never really had a really great class or a really great experience learning anything about how to manage for nutrition in your plants. Now, the old organic gardening idea, the entire point is that healthy soil equals healthy food, which equals healthy people. And there's a lot of people who write about this, but it's not something in academia. Academia really doesn't go into, here's what you need to do to create the most nutritious food in the world. There's not a class you take about that. They just tell you what foods you should eat to be like healthy. When you go to nutrition classes, they say, here's groups of foods that have these types of minerals in them. So, and that kind of stuff. But as far as agricultural production of the food, I've never seen a class that teaches what you need to do to make sure the food you're growing has maximum nutrition in it. And that is a serious problem in the world we live in. And it's interesting to see that the communicable diseases, which is the same as contagious diseases, it may not be exactly the same, but it's, for my purposes tonight, it's the same thing, because we're just scratching the surface. So contagious diseases have gone down over the years. In the last 100 years, we have done a good job in the, in whatever, the human race has done a pretty good job of managing, controlling those types of diseases that are spread from one person to another. And so infectious diseases, kind of the same thing. But it's interesting that nowadays the diseases that are on the rise are the autoimmune diseases. And there's a lot of people who are showing some really good information pointing to the theory that our food supply is creating a malnutrition. There may be a better way to say this, but there's kind of a malnutrition going on in our modern food systems that creates an environment for the autoimmune diseases to be on the rise. I kind of believe this, I don't necessarily believe everything I hear about this. I don't think there's conspiracy ideas about this. I try to keep an open mind, and I try to follow the science behind this. If somebody doesn't have some good tests behind it, I don't really listen to it. But there are a lot of good researchers who are coming up with some really good, some good studies that are showing that this is a truth. So as food producers, whether we have a garden or if we are a small farm or a big farm or a great big mega farm that is producing commodity crops, I think we need to really be focusing on nutrition management, making sure that the food that we produce has a maximum of nutrition in the food. So tonight I just have a quick presentation about what we need to do to have really good management so that we can have maximum amount of nutrition in the foods that we are harvesting and sending out to our customers. Now, it's an interesting thing because we in the agricultural world, we've been around plants for so long that are unhealthy plants that oftentimes we don't even know what a healthy plant looks like. So it's, and I've talked about this before, it's hard to know what a healthy plant looks like. In the class I'm doing right now with my kids here who are taking the 17-week course, we've been talking about this quite a bit the last couple of weeks of what is a healthy plant, what is the criteria of a healthy plant. And we're not even going to go into that tonight, but we are going to be going into what you do to your soil and how we manage every day while we're growing food so that when that harvest is ready, it has a maximum nutrition in it. So there's a test we can do, and it's called a Brix test, and it's simply a measurement of sugars and proteins, and it's the simplest tool. You can get these the Brix reader on Amazon. Let me just go to the next slide here, and I will show you the picture. So here's a picture of a refractometer, and this is a Brix tester. This tests the Brix. Now, the Brix is a scientist's last name who developed this technology, and it was developed a long time ago. Dr. Brix is now gone, but it's a simple tool that anybody can use this. So what you do is you get a piece of leaf from a plant and you would juice the leaf. The best way is to just squeeze the juice out of it. So something like a very robust garlic press would work. If you have a cheap garlic press, it'll usually break on the second or third use of doing this because it takes a lot of pressure. But anything that would squeeze plant leaf material and get a drop out of it works. I use a modified vice grip. So just a big pair of pliers, when we squeeze the juice, the leaf material to get a drop of juice,
that with honey.
Put it on here so that we have the drop of juice, and then the light as it comes through that juice, it simply bends. I don't know if any of you have ever been fishing with like a bow and arrow or a spear, but when you're spear fishing and you're above the surface of the water and you're throwing the spear into the water, you have to aim at a different place from where the fish actually is. If you're aiming directly at the fish, you will miss the fish because the water refracts, the water bends, and so it looks, excuse me, the position of the fish looks different from where it is. And that is exactly what's happening to in the Brix test, so that it gives you a reading when you look through this little instrument. So it bends the light, and depending on how much sugars and proteins are in this solution, and it's mostly sugars is what we're testing for, but when we look through it, if there's a higher level, then it bends the light more. And so when we look through here, it has a scale inside of it, and so it has a different reading. So a low Brix reading would be like a 3 or a 4, and a high Brix reading would be a 10 or 11. But that all depends upon the species. So I'm going to go back to the last slide here, and here's a chart. Now, I don't necessarily expect us to go through this chart tonight. I'm simply showing you that if you do a Google search on Brix readings, you will find many of these charts. There may be a dozen, there may be 2 or 3 dozen of these charts on the internet that are readily available that will show you kind of the ballpark of what to look at. But if you are comparing something like a fruit to a lettuce, let's say like a pear or a peach, those are going to have your excellence are up there near 20. Let's see, the papaya is at 22. So let's look at the vegetables. A common vegetable, like a cucumber, would be a 5. So we have to truly compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges in this reading. If we start saying, oh, I had low Brix readings, if you're comparing different species of foods, it's not science. It's not working. It's not going to tell you a statistic that means anything. You have to only compare one species to itself. So if you want to know what the Brix reading of alfalfa is compared to another field of alfalfa, then this will be useful and it can help. The other thing, if you're going to use this instrument and do this reading to test nutrition levels in foods, you want to be consistent on the time of day and how much light is coming. So if you do this at noon every day for 3 weeks to see if your plants are changing, you will see a difference if you have a very cloudy, overcast day with black rain clouds and you're not getting very much light. The readings can change depending upon environmental factors because of how much sugars the plants are making at the moment. So if a person was going to actually be scientific about this, you have to think this through and you have to take very careful like precautions, or you have to be, you just have to be consistent with your science so that it is making sense. I've known people who've gone to the grocery store and they tested Brix readings of certain things, and I don't know, and they there's quite a few people have told me they've done that, and they all say, oh, those Brix readings are so low. You know, it would be interesting. I've not done this, but I wonder if I took my vegetables that I know have a pretty good Brix reading, they're testing to be good. If I put them in a cooler for a week and a half or 2 weeks in the darkness, I wonder if they would have a high or a low Brix. That would be a fascinating thing. I've not done that, but I am assuming that they would be a low Brix also, just because they're not photosynthesizing, because they have not been in their growing environment once they get on a grocery store shelf. So does that mean that grocery store food is less good than the food we grow in our gardens? I don't think this is good science to make those assumptions. And a lot of people are trying to do that. They try to take this Brix reader and they're trying to test, but it's not accurate science. It's just, I just don't see that that's a good, reliable experiment to do. We all want to say, oh, my food's the best there is. But if we're going to do that, we need to have some accurate ways to quantify and to measure what we're actually talking about. Okay. So I'm going to go to this this next slide here. What do we actually do in our gardens to get a high Brix reading? But before I start on this slide, I do want to make a clarifier here. I do believe that high Brix readings do mean better nutrition. Okay, if you have foods that have high Brix readings, they're going to have high sugars, they're going to have high proteins, and if you have high sugars and proteins, you have more nutritious food. You're also going to have higher levels of minerals in that food. So this is a better food product. It's more nutrient dense. In 1 pound of spinach that has a high Brix, you have more nutrition than in 1 pound of spinach that has low Brix. Now, it's fascinating. There's a lot of people who have done studies on insects, and they have shown that the high Brix reading fruits and vegetables have very low pest damage. And there's been some really good like quality studies done that show when the insects eat the leaves that have high Brix, then those leaves become toxic to the pests, and that's why the pests won't eat them. So wouldn't that be great to be pest-free, disease-free in our garden so we don't have to deal with pests and disease, and also be creating the best nutrition when we eat the food at the same time? Yes, this is what we're creating. This is the ideal that we are shooting for. Do we always get there? No. But can we? Yes, especially if we know about it, because then we can focus on it. So here are the things that we need to do, and I'm just going to go through this slide real quick. We need to create and maintain a functioning soil. If you've been watching these classes, then you already know what that means. But I will just go through it really quickly tonight. A functioning soil has all of the beneficial microbes present. So let me just remind you what those are. Now, all of these are beneficial. There's 5 major groups of the microbes, and then there's 2 other groups that are not microbes. Okay, maybe 3, and maybe 10, depending on how you start to divide these. But we're not in an etymology class here. We're not going to be talking about all the groups of insects, but just basically, we're talking about the beneficial bacteria, fungus, protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods, and then we get into the big ones, which are the macroarthropods and the incatraids and earthworms, all the creepy crawlies that are down there in the soil doing their job. Those guys make the soil function, but they have to have a home to live in. And the home is the 5 spheres of the soil, which is the detritosphere, the porosphere, the agrotosphere, the rhizosphere, and the drillosphere. And I've talked about that on other places, so I'm not going to go into it tonight. It's on previous recordings. But that is the home for these microbes. So if we want to have the most nutrient-dense food, we have to have a functioning soil. You will not have the secondary metabolites turned on in the plants that make those high Brix readings if you don't have the microbes present. And you won't have the microbes present if you don't have a home for them. And the home is that 5 spheres right there on the screen. So how do we get this? We have to start by covering the soil. Imagine if we peeled the skin off of your arm. Now, I know that this is a graphic and disgusting analogy, but if we peeled the skin off of my arm and then I just go to work tomorrow and I pretend nothing's wrong, bad things are going to happen. First of all, it's going to be painful. Second of all, it's going to get infected. It's not going to function. I'm not going to last very long. No human being is going to last very long without their skin on their body. And the detritosphere, which is the covering of the soil, that is the skin of the earth. There should be no bare soil on the earth. There's only a couple of true deserts. Most of our major deserts are man-made over the eons of time. And we are desertifying now. And a lot of times this sounds like propaganda and blah, 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 but it's not. It's solid science. So how do we reverse this? How do we fix this? We cover the soil. And we manage the soil with the 7 health principles, the soil health principles. And here again, I've mentioned these. We've had classes on these in previous recordings. Now, the barometer of this to see if we're doing it right or wrong is whether or not the 4 ecological processes are working. Now, the 4 ecological processes, for a quick review, is the water cycle, the mineral cycle, the ecological succession, and the one I can't think of real quick. But your ecological processes, when energy flow from the sun, that's the 4th one. But if those processes are not working and they're not being maximized and we're not taking advantage of those processes, then our soil will not function. So we need all of these things to happen to have the highest quality food. So if we're out there working on our farm and things are going good and it seems like things are great, but after a good soaking 2-inch rain, if we have to water our crops in 10 days after that, our water cycle is broken. And when I say this, people think I'm nuts. If they've never studied soil health and they've never studied ecology and they're just a farmer all their life, they think I'm nuts because we generally put 1 inch of water a week on gardens. It's what the garden books tell us. but most gardening books are not in, they don't have the knowledge of agriculture, ecology, and soil health. We have to have all three of those things combined to really make it work. Okay? Because we really want the benefits of the highly nutritious food, which means we have low disease, we have low insects, we have high levels of nutrition in the food. The food should taste very good. Quite a few times in the last year and a half, when people have come into my solar greenhouse here, they have eaten things and they were surprised at the flavor because they've never tasted celery that tasted like mine. They've never tasted cabbage that tasted like mine. They've never tasted spinach like mine. The first boot camp I did last year, we had people come in and they were eating spinach, and there were several excuse me, there were several people who said, this is the best spinach I have ever had in my life. And then everybody else, we had about 10 15 people or something, and everybody else wanted to taste it, and it was pretty unanimous. I think everybody agreed that was good spinach. Some of the people were smiling and saying, yeah, I don't really eat spinach because I don't like it, but this is pretty good. This would be wonderful in a salad because it tastes really good by itself. Now, just remember, flavor equals nutrition. Flavor equals nutrition. I like to repeat that. If your food is bland, if it doesn't taste good, it's not nutritious. When you have a steak and you're cutting a T-bone steak or a porterhouse or a rib steak, whatever your favorite cut of meat is, when you cut that and you're eating it, as you're chewing it, it should have as much flavor in that meat when you are done chewing it and you finally swallow it as it had when you first put it in your mouth. That's how you know you have healthy meat. And I don't care what it is, if it's beef or pork or lamb, or if it's wild game like elk, moose, deer, it doesn't matter what kind of meat it is. If those animals have had a diverse diet of an amazing amount of diversity, and they can pick and choose what they eat, then they have a much more nutritious meat for us to consume than if they are in like a commercial system where they have kind of a mono diet, where they're eating one or two or three things, and the flavor is just not there with a lot of our commercial meat. So what I am saying, I will clarify this, all meat is not created equal, and that is for sure. So the way that we get good nutrition in our meat is the same basic principles as how we get good nutrition in our fruit and in our vegetables. We have to have diversity. We have to have microbes. We have to have things functioning in an ecological way that keeps the four natural ecological processes healthy and happy. When you have plants with high Brix, you have super high yields of crops. And a lot of times our crops will get bigger. They will have more beautiful colors. They will taste better than we thought they ever could. And that's what happens. And that's what I mean by when the genetic capacity exceeds our expectations. And that's what we want in all of our foods. When we go out to our garden in 2 or 3 or 4 years, 5 years, however long it takes to get a really good functioning soil, when we walk out there and we see our fruits and vegetables, they're bigger, they're better, they're juicier, the colors are more brilliant, we know we are arriving to having high density food, like nutrition density. And that's what we want. We want that nutrition density there. And we're going to know it first by the flavor. Okay. And these things that I'm talking about, when I'm talking about flavors, colors, shapes, vigor, the plant's roots are putting out lots of exudates. The leaves are growing faster than we can imagine. These are secondary metabolites. And the thing that turns on a secondary metabolite in a plant is an amazing amount of diversity in the microbes in the soil. You take away the microbes, a plant can grow, but the secondary metabolites do not get turned on. And then what happens is the nutrition levels are lower and human health suffers because of the lower nutrition. Okay, so those are my slides for tonight. So there they are. Here's a refractometer. It's just a fun little thing. You can order this on Amazon for under 20 bucks. And there's YouTubes all over the place on how to use them. I think I even have a Patreon on how to use it. But if you come to boot camp and learn from me, or you come to my 17-week course, you will learn how to use all of these tools, and I will train you to grow the best food in the world. So hopefully this has helped you to have some good nutrient-dense food in your own garden. So the question tonight is, do you have questions? That is my question for you. You can ask any questions about gardening in this Q&A tonight. If you have questions about how to grow nutrient-dense food, it would certainly be appropriate to ask it now. You can unmute yourself and talk, or you can type it in the chat, and we will try to get to your question. So go ahead and ask me questions.
I've got a question, William.
Okay.
This stuff is so cool, by the way. It's very exciting. How many more classes do we have, first of all?
I was thinking I would go on forever.
Oh, I would love that.
Because I think I'm turning 48 years old this year. I don't even know how old I am. Isn't that funny? Let's just say I'm turning 48. So we have another 100 years to go.
Awesome.
You know,
Why not?
We need people teaching this.
That's right.
So I'm teaching it.
Okay. Well, I'll write that down. 100 more years to go. Okay. Question. So if we can't get a greenhouse going up way toward Canada, way like close to the border till like October or November, I'm thinking we could grow greens. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that you think that we could be successful doing besides that?
In the cold weather. Is that what you're asking?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so light is more important than the temperature for a lot of plants.
Okay.
So you're saying, like, when you say Canada, what are we talking about? Like
40 to 50 miles below the Canadian border.
Okay. Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, so that's really not that far north. I mean, as far as growing plants, it's not too bad.
Okay.
So
like 2,500 square feet, something like square feet.
Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, here's the thing. You can start, excuse me, you can start a garden any time of year. You could start that, just build the greenhouse.
Okay.
And you've got to remember, the purpose for a greenhouse is to have a 365-day harvest. That's the entire point. Okay. Yeah. So it doesn't matter when you start it. See, people, we have it, and that's what I'm hearing you say. This is so I'm totally going to accuse you, but
that's all good.
But we have been indoctrinated our entire life because of our culture, because of the books, and because of all the other information about gardening. So when do you start your garden? Well, in the springtime. If you're in the mountains, it'll be, towards the end of May. If you're in the valleys and in the desert, it'll be the end of April or the beginning of May. But May is when everybody starts their garden in North America. And I guess that's okay if you only want to eat for a few months of the year. But let's start eating for 12 months of the year. And let's start growing our own food. So just start. When I built this solar greenhouse here that I'm teaching all my classes in now, I started building it the first week of July. It took me 6 months to build it. And it actually took longer than that. But I was doing finishing touches after I started growing, but I got the covering on, so the roof was on, and so it was sealed up from wintertime. And so that happened in November. So I planted in the last week of November. Our first harvest was, I think, I would have to look at the calendar, but it was in January, the beginning of January, maybe January 4th or January 6th, something like that. So the plants grew for a week or two in November. They grew all of December, and then a couple of days in January. So in about 5-6 weeks of growth, I had radishes, lettuce, spinach, and baby kale.
Wow.
So that was pretty awesome. And you've got to realize that is the slowest growing period of the year, because our shortest day of the year is the 21st of December. And so, in the 21st of December, that's a problem because there's no light.
Yeah.
And so your plants are growing very, 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 very slowly. So
now when you say light, it is just like daylight versus sunshine. So on a cloudy day, it's still light. So that's what you mean by light, or no?
Yeah, so that's a pretty technical question, and it's a great question. So the more light intensity you have from the sun, the more photosynthesis happens to your plant. If you have pretty dark, cloudy days, then you're going to have a lot slower growth.
Okay.
A lot of people, they get a greenhouse up and then they call me in February and say, I planted stuff before Christmas and I haven't harvested a thing. And they were expecting to eat out of the gardens like they garden outside in the growing season.
Right.
And things take 3 to 4 times longer to grow. So you have to plant a lot more of it. Winter gardening is very different than summer gardening. So the best way to manage a winter garden, a greenhouse garden, is you want to plant most of your plants in the fall, meaning the end of August. You'd start your seeds. They're growing through the long days of September, October. The days start shortening up. November, they're shortening up a lot. But by the time Thanksgiving comes, if you've started stuff in the last week or the second to last week of August, by the time Thanksgiving comes along, you will have a greenhouse full of almost mature plants. And then you can pick those plants throughout the winter. You'll be picking your last things, like maybe even into March, maybe April on some stuff. Now, certain you don't want to be eating plants that have been sitting there a long, long time. So there's kind of mixed, ideas about this, because plants that grow throughout the winter a long time, some of the harmful acids in the plants start to build up, and it can make people kind of, if you're susceptible to some of those things, you can have some reactions to some of those. We think we're eating the most healthy food in the world. Sometimes there can be some issues with that, but that's an entirely different class than what we can cover right now tonight. But
so can we have a class on that then?
Maybe, but I don't know that much about it because that goes into human nutrition. Now, I don't understand human nutrition. So, I mean, I could give you a 5-minute class sometime, but
I'll take that. Okay, so bolting, you're not going to have issues with that in the winter then? Or?
No, bolting usually happens in the springtime. Bolting is a springtime thing. So the longest day of the year just passed. It was June 21st, 2 days ago or something? And so that was our longest day. So now, from here on out, for the rest of the growing season this year, which means from now until Christmas or whatever, if you have a greenhouse, it's now till Christmas. So this is the perfect time to plant things like all of your oriental greens. If you're into Mizuna and bok choy and mi kwing choy and joy choy and I don't know, there's just a lot of those guys. If you plant them in the spring, you won't get anything to eat. You just get these tall stems with flowers on them. But right now is when to plant them. like like fennel, fennel that has the bulb, not the leafy fern leaf part, but the big bulbs that you can eat. You would want to be planting those seeds right now. So there's
Okay.
probably 10 weird vegetables out there that if you plant them now, they do wonderful in the fall
Okay.
because they don't bolt in the fall and winter.
Okay. I'd be interested in that if you want to throw a 5-minute thing on that sometime too.
Yeah. All
That'd
right.
be awesome. Okay, I'll get back in the rotation for another question.
Okay, fun.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, somebody else ask a question. Either type it into the chat. Oh, I should open the chat. There's probably already some in here. Yeah, there are. Okay. Okay, John Fisher said, we have had beef in our freezer for over 10 years. Last night we had a roast. It was bland. Does the Brix level decrease over time? I don't even know if you can test beef with a Brix level. I mean, maybe you can, I don't know. I do know that meat does deteriorate over time. So, the decade, that's quite a bit of time to have beef in the freezer. So yeah, it's probably losing some vigor or something. That it probably has to do with how old it is for sure. Yeah. Leslie said, what are your thoughts on microgreens? I love microgreens. I think they're great. The good thing about microgreens is none of those bad acids that build up in plants over the winter time, none of those will be in a microgreen because the microgreens are only growing for 4 weeks or 6 weeks at the most. If it grows more than 6 weeks, it's not a microgreen anymore. It's a baby leaf. So microgreens are great. I love them. They're good. They're very nutritious. They don't take any fertilizer or they take no plant nutrient. You don't have to inoculate the soil. 100% of the nutrients from the microgreens come from the seed itself. The only thing it doesn't come from the seed would be the water. And so you don't have to have the mineralizing microbes. You don't have to have any of that stuff. Now, if you have a good gut microbiome in your gut, in your whole own body, in your digestive system, microgreens are going to be awesome. If you are lacking in a healthy digestive system, then you will not be inoculating that with microgreens because usually we are just growing those in a kind of a sterile environment. That's how they're grown. If you were to grow your own and wanted to try to re-inoculate your own microbiome by having food that has all kinds of germs all over it. By germs, I mean the healthy bacteria and so on. Then you could grow it in worm castings or something like that. If you took your own worm castings, your own really good compost, and that was what you were growing your microgreens in, then those really healthy what is it? Just the microbes, the microbiome that's in that worm casting, they would be on that food when you ingested it. And that would be a good thing. One of the reasons that the people way smarter than me are saying that we're sick with all the autoimmune stuff is we don't have a healthy microbiome anymore. We have cleaned ourselves to death and we're dying of crazy things nowadays because we are too antibacterial, too many shampoos, too many. I mean, I'm all for hygiene. I mean, I'm a normal modern person. I take a shower every day. But we don't want to be doing things that kill the microbes that make us healthy. So when it comes to microgreens, if you're just buying microgreens, you're going to be getting a pretty good nutritional product, but you won't be getting the good microbes because they are not traditionally grown in a microbe rich environment. And if they were, I'm pretty sure that whoever they are, the powers that be, would shut somebody down if they found that out. Because if you can detect a microbe, whether it's a beneficial or a bad one, if any microbes are detected on food for human consumption, farmers are shut down. Yeah. Which is not very smart, but that's the world we live in right now.
Can I ask a follow-up question to the microgreens? worm castings. Is that poop? What's
Yeah.
castings?
Yeah, a worm casting is a worm poop. Yeah, let's just be clear about that. It is worm poop. So if that sounds bad and you wouldn't want the microbe from a worm poop to get in your food, then my answer to that is we simply need more education about our relationship to the rest of the ecosystem that we live in. Now, when you take your compost and you smell it, I don't know if you've been, well, I have some right here. I don't know if you can see can you guys see my face on your screens?
Yes.
So I have.
Dad, you need to end your screen recording if you want the recording on YouTube to show this.
Oh, thank you. How do I do that? Okay, so stop share.
Yep.
Okay, so here we go. So you guys can see this, right? So I've got my hand here. So this is a compost, and you can see the wood chunks in it. So there's wood chunks in here, right here. Just somebody say yes if you can see this.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So this is just a piece of wood, just shredded wood. We cut down a bunch of tree limbs. We shredded them up with a big shredder on the back of a tractor. And the reason these are in here is to feed fungus. If you have compost without woody things, you won't have a good fungal component. So that's why there's big chunks in here. But everything in here, except for the big chunks, has gone through a worm. So I have a handful of worm poop right here. As coarse and crass and irreverent as that might be, this is the reality. Now, I'm going to smell this right here so that you can see me smell it, and I will describe what it smells like. I had my students smelling this stuff the other day, and they were happy about it. Okay, I'm not coughing because I'm smelling it. I'm coughing because I always cough. I've been coughing for 8 years. I don't know what's wrong with me. Okay, this has absolutely no odor at all. No odor at all. When you have a finished compost and it has no odor, then you know that you have done a good job at your compost. And what it means is that there are no anaerobic critters in there, because it is the anaerobic guys that cause disease, that cause sickness, that kill plants, humans, and animals. And so, but what is in here? I mean, it's worm poop. It's full of all kinds of microbes, but they are all absolutely aerobic. They are full of oxygen. And when we have high levels of oxygen, we have no detectable disease-causing organisms at all. The spirochetes, the spirilla, all of those guys are gone. And let me say that in English that more people understand. Things like E. coli and Salmonella and Pasturella and Shigella. What are some others? Anyway, those are common diseases that people can get. And if your compost smells good, those do not exist. Okay.
That sounds good. I'm becoming a convert in the way that you think. It's just taking me a little bit of time here. How do you recommend cleaning your food? Like, you know, we have the clean, you know, peel it, scrub it, spray it, you know, what do you do?
Stop.
Do you rinse it off or just pull it out and eat it? What do you do?
I mean, if you want your teeth to last longer, wash the sand off of it. So, because, you know, if you ate a lot of sandpaper, it'd grind your teeth down. Other than that, eat a lot of dirt.
Okay.
Well, this is insanity, right? We don't talk about this in the world today. There's a great book. It's called Eat Dirt. There's another great book called Teeming with Microbes. And these are newer genres of books. I shouldn't say genre. They're newer publications. Nobody was talking about this like 15, 20 years ago. There weren't very many people talking about this. And if they were the hippies. They were the weirdos. They were the whoever's. They were the I don't even know the derogatory terms that people would call the smart ones back, But nowadays it's becoming very much more mainstream because we are understanding that we need to get dirty.
And
Little
taste a little bit
children who are 5 years old, and they are they're coming down with diseases that old people get, like psoriasis and eczema. And these are all because the microbes are not present on their skin, because their mothers are clean freaks and they're putting antimicrobial stuff all over them from the day they're born. And this is insanity.
Huh.
Except we didn't know it. I'm not trying to be derogatory or mean to anyone. It's just that there's a lot of things we didn't know. But now that we know, we need to come up with the modern knowledge and get converted, like you said a minute ago, Leslie, and start doing things that will help us be healthier people. When we pull a carrot out of the ground, go ahead and spray it with the hose. But if you can still see some color on it, eat that.
Okay. I'm going to do it. Not with, I feel like I still need to wash my store-bought veggies. Or is that true or no?
Yeah, if you get it from the store, you better be washing it, because
Okay.
it's going to have all kinds of residues on it that are not healthy.
The organic, you've like blown
If
my
it's
mind.
organic, wash it twice.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go back in line again for another question.
All right. The reason I say if it's organic, wash it twice is yeah, I don't even know why. It's because some of those organic things are just as harmful as some of the conventional ones. It's not okay. Okay, where are we at? Let me go. Okay. John said, I had holes throughout my raised garden. It looked like a mole, but it's a new garden. Could it, because the soil is not compacted yet? Yeah, I mean, if it's a mole, yeah, rodents would dig through a brand new garden easily, for sure. So that's probably what it is. You probably have some kind of a rodent digging around in there. That's where violence comes in, We've outlawed violence. We've outlawed a lot of things, but that would be really healthy violence to kill a mole that's destroying your food supply. That'd be a good thing. John also said, I cleaned my store-bought food for chemicals, but I should have to wash food from my garden, right? I mean, you know how you manage your garden. If you would eat what you put on your plants, then don't wash your food. And that's kind of the thing, Would you eat the compost that you're putting on your garden? Now, 99.9999% of people would say, well, no, I wouldn't eat the compost. Well, I would eat some of my compost, mostly for demonstration purposes, to prove that it's not going to hurt you. What I would do, though, I would look at it under my microscope first, because I don't want to get sick. But I'm pretty confident. I'm 99% confident that I would eat or drink anything that I would put on my plant. So if you have that mentality and you have that level of confidence in what you're doing with your garden, go ahead. Would you mix up Miracle Grow or and all that stuff, and would you put that on your garden? Would you drink that? I mean, yeah. So you just have to kind of figure that out. And if you're not confident in making those kinds of decisions, then we just need to keep learning. So the simple answer to that, John, is no, you shouldn't have to wash the vegetables from your garden. And I know that you're not putting weird stuff on it, so you should be fine. So no tunnels in your garden, just holes. Well, you may have, there's a lot of things that dig holes. Squirrels will dig holes. Gophers will dig holes, even if they don't tunnel down. A dog would dig a hole. Cats will dig holes. There's lots of little critters that dig holes. If they're very small holes, wasps dig holes. If they're little, a wasp will dig a hole and tunnel down in 6 or 8 inches. And there's a lot of other insects that will do that. You may have like, there's a lot of different kinds of beetles that will dig little holes in the soil. Usually, if it's not directly hurting a plant, let it stay. If they're not directly eating your food, let those stay, because they are part of your diversity in your ecosystem, and they probably have a really good function. We need more diversity of life. So, that's something to think about. Leslie said, can you tell us how much land does a cow need again? One cow needs, it depends how much feed you're growing, obviously. But, if you had 1 acre, that would give you good feed for a year. You would need to study some holistic planned grazing is the most productive way, and that comes from probably the greatest ecologist alive today. His name is Alan Savory. We actually teach Savory classes here on the ranch. We've had a couple of them so far this summer, and we're having 2 more later on. But yeah, the grazing of cattle is one of the greatest things we can do. Because the cow is the most amazing animal, because they can eat 1 portion of grass and then fertilize 2 portions. Meaning, if it took 1 acre to feed the cow, she would fertilize 2 acres. What this means is that creates enough fertilizer to turn the Sahara back into a grassland like it was thousands of years ago. When you read the Bible and you look closely at the descriptions of Egypt, it is not how it looks today. And there's a lot of other books describing Egypt because it's such an ancient civilization besides the Bible. There's a lot of books out there in ancient libraries in weird languages that talk about Africa, because people have been there since people have been on Earth. And they describe those areas as massive grasslands that was teeming with all kinds of life, very fertile, very beautiful. And when we dig down, we find the carbon layers under the sands that prove it was a grassland. So we have the human testimony of that from ancient writings, and we have the scientific data to show it, which is pretty awesome. But cattle are the best tool that humans have. The only animal in the world that can reverse desertification and make the earth receive its paradisical glory. That's just a thing I say. I like it. I have a scriptural reference I like to that. But if you've never heard that before, what that means is we green the earth. We turn the earth into a lush paradise of forests and lands that are very productive for all manner of life on the earth, for all birds, mammals, insects, microbes, humans, everything. And so humans are the only ones who can do that. There's no other animal that can actually turn it back into a beautiful living place. But the cow, the bovine, is the best tool humans have to do that, because of that fertilizer thing. Like a horse or a donkey or goat or sheep, all these other animals, they can't produce that much good fertilizer from their manure. They usually will eat 1 acre and they fertilize 1 acre, so they maintain it. That's what most animals do. But a cow will do it twice as much, which is a miracle. It's so great.
Okay. Thank you. I've got so I think we probably have 3 acres that we could dedicate for grazing land. Is it better to have that be all 3 acres, or rotate them to different pastures?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna give you a semester's worth of information in 30 seconds. Somebody start the timer.
Okay.
Most people think that overgrazing means there are too many animals on the land. They are wrong.
Okay.
Desertification happens because of overgrazing. Overgrazing happens because animals are on the land too much, and the grass does not have time to grow back.
Yeah.
So I'm done with the 30 seconds. Any clarifying questions about that?
Does Parker know about this? Did you see him wave behind you, by the way?
Yeah. He's here. I think he's listening.
Is he there? Does he
Yeah.
know about this? This is because I can pick his brain if I have.
Yeah, we've been talking about this. This is
Okay.
what I drill into these kids the entire time they're here.
Okay.
It's good stuff.
Okay, because right now it used to be, I think they grew alfalfa on it before. It was logging, I think, before that. So when we were up there in April, there kind of was nothing. I mean, it was still, nothing had sprung up yet. So I don't actually know what it's like at the moment. So would we plant stuff? Like would plant out?
If it's not growing, yes, plant it.
Okay.
You know. So yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now I want to give a 4-hour class on grazing and how we reverse desertification, but we better not go into that tonight. I'm getting tired already.
I have a question.
Ezekiel, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I suppose I should say, is it a good idea to rotate between land you're reserving for gardening and pasture?
I would say no. I would recommend against that because pastures usually are full of perennial plants, a plant that grows year after year after year. And gardening, in the gardening world, we would call those weeds. Ecologically, those are not weeds, but in the gardening context, we would call that a weed. And so how many of you have ever tried to start a garden with, you know, and it's just a pasture? It's a nightmare for 2 or 3 years for most people because all these perennial plants are growing and your vegetables are suffering. And the other thing is you've got to remember your community dynamics, which is the same thing as ecological succession. And what that teaches us is that different groups of plants will grow depending on the different microbes that are in the soil. So if you have a perennial grassland, most of your vegetables are not going to do good in that soil anyway, because there's too much fungus in that soil. If it's healthy, you need less fungus and more bacteria. So, you know, here again, that's a complicated question with a semester's worth of information to get on the other side of complexity, you know, so that we understand what we're talking about. But no, I would not have a pasture in rotation with cattle unless you had all annual plants that you were growing for your pasture. And then it may work really well.
So here, okay. I saw an interesting video and I wanted your thoughts on it, and I think it might be valuable to everybody else. I saw a thing that they're doing in part of Israel where they have miles of orchard and they run cattle in it in managed grazing, and they basically turn their orchard trees into fence posts, and they'll put up boards between them to keep them in specific areas. And so they've kind of merged their orchard and their cattle herd. Do you think that's a viable long-term strategy, or are there problems that would arise with that?
From the information you just gave me, it sounds like it could work. But the management is everything. You know, if the grass and the other forages have enough recovery time, then it's probably going to work. But the reason that people think that cattle are an ecological problem is because they don't let enough recovery time happen. In brittle environments, which means an environment that has a long dry season, like the Western United States is a brittle environment. Israel is a brittle environment. In those brittle environments, you need to rest the land for about a year. Now, if it's an irrigated pasture and you're growing feed, it's a little bit different. But if we're just talking about Mother Nature, the way it is out there on the rangeland, you have to recover for a year. People don't understand recovery. And that's when the species of plants begin to die out. And what kills them? It's the grazers. It's the cattle. So the cattle get the bad rap, but the cattle are the solution. They are our #1 tool. Okay, I'm going to go back to the chat and we're going to look and see here. Okay, so the cow one we did. So John said our nitrogen in our raised garden soil is low. What do we do? Add some nitrogen. So you could go buy some fertilizer from the store. If you want to be on the organic side of things, buy some blood meal and then follow the directions on the container. You could buy some fish emulsion or fish hydrolysate, and then follow the directions on the, on the container. If you don't care about organic, get something like a Miracle Grow, and you could get the nitrogen in there that way. I don't recommend the Miracle Grow because your plants become dependent on it, and the microbes that create the nitrogen will not grow on the roots the way they're supposed to. And then you will have to add those chemical fertilizers forever. So the organic ones are better because they help the proper microbes to grow. Okay. Melanie bought a test kit. Phosphorus is adequate. Okay, great. Yeah, your phosphorus, your potassium usually are pretty good. Nitrogen is the hardest one to keep in the soil. So just add some blood to it, or add some fish, and you'll be good. What else should you look for? Make sure your plants look good. If your plants, if the color of the leaves looks funny, if they're starting to yellow, it's usually a nitrogen problem. Sometimes the yellowing can be an iron problem too. And so if you have low iron, you would want to buy an iron supplement, like a chelated iron. Be very careful with it, because if you put too much out, everything will die, and you'll probably have to remove that soil, because when it comes to the metals that you need to add, be very, very careful. In fact, I don't think you can buy it at Walmart or Home Depot, because people are stupid and they think, oh, if a little is great, then a lot will do more and be better. And that's not true. So, but chelated or chelated, two ways to pronounce the same thing, iron would work, but it's probably, I think you were putting peat moss and stuff in there. Iron levels are probably fine. It's probably nitrogen. Nitrogen's the most common thing to deal with. Ashley said, is llama fertilizer just as good as cows? No, it's not. Llama is good, but it's not as good as cows. John said, our topsoil was from an orchard. It is full of weeds, mostly grass. If you have a lot of weeds coming up, then you're probably in early succession, so you need to add fungus. So how do you get fungus there? You give it some food. So get wood chips out there so that the fungus can start to grow and colonize. Not sawdust. Sawdust is too fine. You want it chipped. The fine size, the little size of wood chips will suffocate your soil, and it can go anaerobic. But I would not till any wood product in. You just put 2 or 3 inches on top of the soil that's there, and then the fungus can start to grow in that. And keep it moist. So if you have a sprinkling system that can come on once a day, if that's too much water for your plants, then only have it on for 1 minute or 30 seconds a day. But that'll really get your fungus going. You don't think it's crabgrass? That's good. What should you do? I just told you. Get your fungus going a little bit better. If it's a perennial grass, then you're not in early succession. But just pull the grass out. If you don't want to pull the grass out, put a cardboard on it, and that'll stop it from growing. And then cover the cardboard with your wood chips, 4 or 5 inches of wood chips. Okay, any other questions? I think I got all the ones in the chat. If I didn't get the ones in the chat, sorry. But if anybody else has a question, please ask, and I'll try to do this. Oh, hold on. Helena had a question. If I have a garden growing already and the nutrition isn't very good, can I get something like alfalfa and blend it up to get the juices and pour it on my plants? Yes, you can do a foliar feed. You can do it with fresh growing alfalfa. You could do it with comfrey if you have any. You could do it with, if you have a compost, you could just make up a compost extract dump that on the plants. So there's a lot of things you can do to foliar feed, but you've got to realize that foliar feeding is best if you focus on the soil first. The foliar feeding, I mean, it's going to absorb some, but I think like 90%, maybe 95%, maybe more, all comes from the roots. So foliar is good, and there's a lot of great science publications that say it doesn't do much, and there's a lot of them that say it does a lot. So there needs to be a lot more information, a lot more like experiments, good experiments done on foliars to see what is actually happening. It could be the time of day that the plants are bringing it in. It could be a symbiotic relationship with certain microbes that are living on the surfaces of the plant leaves. There's a lot of factors, and there's not enough scientists doing the research to figure all this out. We need a lot of young people going into the sciences to learn so much more. So, you know, but to answer your question really good, Helena, focus on your soil health. Get your composts going good. If you already have some going good, I know we talked about this a long time ago because you came to boot camp, but if you haven't had a chance to get the composts going, get that started. So what do you do in the meantime, right now during the growing season? Here's what you do. You fertilize those plants with a good fertilizer that's going to help those microbes grow, and you cover the soil. Take any plant material that you have. It could be old hay, it could be grass clippings, it could be manure, it could be anything. If it's manure, it needs to be old enough that it doesn't smell like manure anymore. And then you mix all that stuff up and you put 4 to 6 inches on your soil. Cover that soil. That's the number one thing to do. And then if you have a good compost, mix up a compost extract like we did at boot camp. Spread that on top of that to get the microbes in there. If you don't have the compost, then go ahead and just get your fertilizer around each plant to get the plant nutrients that they need. And here again, a good plant, a good fertilizer would be like a fish hydrolysate. Just go to Walmart, go to Home Depot, grab a jug of the fish emulsion. Fish emulsion, fish hydrolysate, same thing. I mean, a little bit, it might be a tiny bit different, but when you're just grabbing it off the shelf, it's the same thing. It could have different labels on it. But fertilize those plants so that they are growing. Okay. Okay, excuse me. Okay, I got some new messages down here. John said, how much phosphorus would you add to a square foot garden? None. You shouldn't have to add any phosphorus. Ever. Never. I mean, if you want to add some phosphorus, I mean, you can go buy some phosphorus at the store. You know, if you're looking at your what is it? There's your gallon jug of whatever fertilizer you're buying. It's gonna have 3 numbers on it, like it'll say like 500 or 10 or whatever. It'll have all these different combinations. And so if there's a number in all 3 sections besides 0, it's going to have phosphorus in it. But you shouldn't have to add phosphorus to soils because, you know, I mean, if you actually have a phosphorus deficiency, maybe you would. It's very rare to have a phosphorus deficiency. Just get those microbes thriving in your soil. And the way you're going to do that is you want to dump plenty of that fish hydrolysate on there, and they're going to start growing for you. How do you get rid of a critter putting holes in the garden? Shoot them.
We can't see them. We never see them. And they're not doing tunnels. There's just holes throughout, and only one. It's only 1 square foot garden.
It might be a bird.
But they're pretty deep. They're like this deep.
Yeah, I don't know. So you never see them. Put a net over that garden. Do you have some chicken wire? Build a net, put over that garden to keep them off. You could use a floating rope cover. You could use tulle fabric like they make wedding dress veils out
Oh.
of. So there's 3 options of different kinds of coverings.
Okay. And that's only if they're visiting and then digging a hole.
Yeah. I mean, do you think they're living in the dirt?
Well, I wondered that. And so I stuck my fingers down in and there, it doesn't go anywhere. There's no tunnels.
What if it would have bit you with its teeth when your finger was in there?
That would have been scary. I figured there were too many, and where I was working and digging, maybe he went somewhere else. But yeah, it's the strangest thing. And I thought maybe it was from the drip irrigation that's going in there, maybe too much power in one spot, but it's in between.
Yeah.
Dripping.
Yeah, because a stream of water, that'll dig a hole. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, those are my thoughts.
We'll
If
try it.
I have something digging, you either cover it with a barrier on top so that you have, and chicken wire works. And that's good for the big animals because then your pollinators can still get in. Bees can still go through that and get to
Yeah.
any flowers. If it's something smaller, then a floating rope cover or the tulle fabric, those are great products that you can keep them off with. If he's already down in the soil and he's coming from underneath, yeah, good luck. Get a sharp stick and poke around in there and see if you can stick.
Which is so strange because do we have ground cover between our topsoil? And And-
We have
we had cardboard.
cardboard.
We put cardboard on the bottom of the square foot garden.
Yeah, sometimes rodents can get through a lot of that stuff because they're persistent.
And then underneath that was a stupid ground cover that they put on top of the
But
topsoil.
But the
Yeah.
but gardens don't have it.
Yeah, but the other 2 square foot gardens that are just divided with a board don't have them.
Yeah.
Almost sounds like it is a critter, huh? Yeah.
Okay, John. Yeah, you can press board on top of carrot seeds. It's just anything to keep them moist so that the hot sun doesn't evaporate the water. Because those carrot seeds need to be pretty shallow, but then when the surface of that soil dries out, that's a serious problem because it kills those very young germinating seeds. So for 24 hours a day for about a week and a half, that soil surface needs to stay wet. So putting any barrier on there works really great. So the press board would work for you. Okay, any other questions tonight? I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up unless we have a question that comes in. Ezekiel, did you have anything else you wanted to say? Seems like you wanted to talk about the science of gardening in the north is a huge advantage.
Yes, I'll just say this real quick. So, gardening in the northern hemisphere is awesome. Actually, the southern hemisphere would probably be cool too. There's just less land down there. So the closer you are to the equator, the more and more of your land is arranged in such a way in relationship to the sun that your day and night cycle is pretty much even throughout the year. You have a little bit of change right on the equator. It's basically the same all year round. Even on the longest day of the year, it's not very long. And there's this sweet spot that Montana and the kind of that area sits in between the north and the south, between the North Pole and the equator, where during the summer, you get extra sunlight. And during the winter, when it's colder and things don't grow as well anyway, you get less sunlight. So you can effectively think of it as the sunlight that would have been wasted in an outdoor garden during the winter, because it might be too cold, is taken out of your winter growing season and put into your summer growing season. It's why the great grain nations of the world are above the tropics. And it's why a lot of your great places are all above the horse latitudes, which set in a very specific latitude, and we won't get into that. But it's awesome that some people are gardening up in that area, the Montana kind of latitude, because that's the area that has the best bang for your buck with light on an outside garden. And it's absolutely fantastic. It's just so, it's great. It's great.
All right, Ezekiel, thank you for that little tidbit, and you're absolutely right. I think the biggest cabbage in the Book of World Records came from Alaska, probably Juneau, Alaska, because it's light, you know, and those types of plants respond to exactly how much light they're getting. So when you go to a certain latitude, it's really nice to do research on the climate you're in, the latitude you're in, all that information, all those environmental factors, because then you can maximize your opportunity to grow the best food in the world. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this down for the night. We will be back next Thursday, and we were going to be talking about another management principle next week. So thank you for being on. And if you have any questions, you can always reach me on my personal Facebook page. And also you can email me or text me on my phone. Have a great night, and thank you for being with us.
Hey, so William,
Yeah.
I had a hard time getting on. I couldn't find the link tonight. I don't know if I wasn't looking in the right place, but
The link, yeah, the link is always on my Facebook page.
I just didn't see it.
Yeah, so if you go to my personal Facebook page, I always post the current link for each class, like either the day of or the day before.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, and good night.
Good night.